Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Welcome back to another episode of the Guides Network. Today, we're going to give you some winter bass fishing tips that work great at Lake Fork during the pre-spawn and also other lakes like Toledo Bend where we are today. These can work anywhere, especially in the southern region of the United States when you're talking about winter pre-spawn bass fishing. We're going to break down today how to go about shallow cranking in the pre-spawn to get big bites. Well, it is the winter, it is the pre-spawn, and a lot of times that can mean lethargic fish that don't really want to bite, so you got to make them react. We've talked about this a lot on some of the recent episodes of the Guides Network, whether it be the jig, making it fall fast through root systems to get reactions, whether it be a jerkbait and the erratic action that a jerkbait has to cause reaction bites. A lot of times it's about getting them to react. And man, a crankbait is really, really good, and especially as we get later in the pre-spawn and temps start to warm up a little bit, you can be so efficient with a crankbait, you can cover so much water, and you can get those deflections, those subtle bounces that cause these fish to react in ways or to things that they normally just wouldn't bite anything else. But that crankbait comes along, hits something just right, deflects just right, and man, it gets a reaction out of that fish, and boom, next thing you know, you got a big fish on the line that wouldn't have been anything else. You could have put it right in his face, he would have never bit, but that reaction quality of the crankbait's what gets them to bite. Now, when we're talking about winter pre-spawn cranking, there's several different types of crankbaits, because one thing about winter pre-spawn, things are changing. Water temps are going from cold to warm. Days are going from short to long. Everything's changing conditions wise. So you got to have a variety of crankbaits to cover different types of cover, different types of structure, and also the changing conditions that you're going to deal with in the pre-spawn period. Now, as many of you guys know, I am sponsored by 6 Sense Fishing, but I will stand behind their hard baits. They make the best hard baits in the game, second to none. I mean, they make, I should say, make as good. It's hard to go out and say somebody makes the best, but they make as good of a hard bait as anybody on the market today. And a couple of these baits that I'm going to show you today are pretty unique to them. First one's going to be the Crush Flat 75X. It's got a flat side on that crankbait. These are my two main colors that I throw it in. That's Supermodel Shad, and that's Tiger Truce. It's kind of like a lipless crankbait with a square bill on it. So basically, lipless crankbaits are phenomenal. Everybody knows about lipless crankbaits in the wintertime. The tight wiggle, the tight vibration qualities that they have are going to draw more bites in the wintertime, hitting it in grass. Problem with the lipless crankbait is you get it around wood and it's going to grab every piece of wood it can. That's where this joker comes in. You get that square lip on there, and now you've got a flat-sided crankbait, has a tight wiggle similar to that of a lipless crankbait, but it will deflect off of wood and cover, hard cover like that. Rock, it's great around rock, it's great around shell beds, it's great around wood, and we're going to talk more about areas lately, and that shell bed deal, we're going to discuss that, because in the pre-spawn, that might be in our region, whether it's here at Toledo Bend, whether it's Sam Rayburn, whether it's Lake Fork, Ray Roberts, it doesn't matter. Palestine, all these shell bed areas become a factor in the pre-spawn. They're feeding tables, and in pre-spawn they're feeding. So we're gonna talk a lot about that here in a little bit. But yeah, the tight wiggling flat 75X, probably my favorite cold water crankbait. It just, man, it catches fish. It catches a lot of fish, it catches big fish, it's just tremendous. Now another one that's really, really great is gonna be the Curve 55. Now this is gonna be a little bit deeper diver. One thing about this, you know what, maybe I should start this over, because this right here, you're gonna hit anywhere from 4 to 6 foot of water depth with that. That's where you're gonna fish this. If I'm gonna fish from 6 to 8, I want the Crush 55. Man, this thing right here has a crazy, it's like an old wiggle wart basically. It's a modern take, a modern upgrade on a wiggle wart is essentially what this bait right here is. And it's gonna get down there and wander and hunt and really erratic action like that. You get into that 6-8 foot range, and it's gonna do that. If I want to go a little bit deeper, I want to go down to say 10 foot, maybe even 11 foot, I'm going to go with the Crush 250 MD, just a normal standard type medium depth crankbait. And if I need to get shallow, we've got the one of a kind 6 Sense Movement 80X, one of my favorite baits ever made, caught a bazillion big fish on this. All right, let's talk about those areas, because depending on what area you're fishing is going to be which bait you choose. So if I'm on a warming trend, if the weather, and we talked about the conditions changing all the time during pre-spawn, if it's a warming trend, and I feel like those fish, the warmest water is the shallowest water, and so those fish are going to want to be extremely shallow in that situation, man, the Movement 80X is the way to go. You throw it up there, and this thing deflects so hard and violently off cover that it draws really big bites. I have just caught, I mean, I've already been catching big fish on it this year. For years, ever since the first year it came out, even when it was a prototype before it came out, I've been catching big fish in cold water on the Movement 80X. So if my water temps are rising, my water temps are warm trending, the Movement 80X is my first pick. Standard everyday cold water fishing, just pre-spawn, normal, not really a warm trend, not really a cold trend, kind of whatever. Hey, the Crush Flat 75X is going to be the one I go to, right? And I'm going to fish that in that 4 to 6 foot range. And that's perfect for hitting the bottoms of creek channels where fish might be hunkered down. And that's perfect for hitting the rounded off edges, the outside edges, or the little bit slightly deeper part of shell beds. It's really effective in that area. So the water starts to cool trend a little bit. I'm going to start reaching for the Curve 55, and I'm going to start reaching for the 250 MD. And it's really just going to depend on how deep those fish are. I might actually, even in cool trends, still use the Crush Flat 75X or the Movement 80X. But most of the time, especially I'm fishing main lake oriented fish, points, shell beds, stuff like that, pond dams, stuff that we like to fish in the pre-spawn. Hey, I'm going to start reaching for these deeper diving baits as the water starts to cool off. Those fish will, you know, we've got these shallow points. Let's talk about the areas a little bit. And one of the main areas I really want to discuss is these shell beds because, man, these shell beds are great. They are feeding tables. The shell beds exist where the plankton tends to gather on the lake. So, you know, these freshwater mussels, freshwater shells, they eat plankton. That's their food source. So wherever that plankton tends to get pushed up on points and pushed up on ridges and that plankton really gets condensed and gathered in the water column, well, that's the areas that you're going to find these shell beds at. Well, shad also feed on plankton. So the areas that tend to gather the plankton and condense the plankton, when the wind blows in those areas and it does that, the shad show up in big numbers in those areas. And for pre-spawn, when bass are wanting to feed, you can kind of see where this is going. They really want to pull up and eat a lot of shad at once. There's no better place than an active shell bed that's got some plankton condensed on it and some shad stacked up on it. There's just not a better place on planet Earth for a bass to be during a pre-spawn than right there. So what happens is these bass pull up onto these shell beds on active days, good days, man, things are happening. And it doesn't always have to be warm for them to pull up on there. It's kind of, if the wind's blowing right, the plankton's right, the sun's out, things are blooming, it can happen. And so the bass just pull up there and feed on these little tables. They're just like little feeding tables. But when the water cool trends and things get inactive, they just pull off. And the good thing about a lot of these shell beds is they have deep water access. They have creek channel swings, drains. In fact, I'm sitting on one on Toledo. There's a shell bed right behind me right now on Toledo Bend, and there's a creek swing right there. And creek swings right up against it. So those fish can pull up on this little 4 to 5 foot, 3 foot shell bed and then roll off into that creek channel swing whenever it cold trends. And so that's what makes these shell beds so special in the pre-spawn. Those fish can move shallow to deep. And they got a perfect feeding table, perfect gathering spot for shad, but then they got a deeper water area that they can roll into and kind of hide from the cold weather a little bit. And that's why this variety of crankbaits is so effective because A, whether they want to bite or not, a crankbait can get a deflection and get a reaction and can make them bite. And B, you can cover all the different depths so effectively with this, you know, handful of crankbaits. And we got 4 models of crankbaits I'm showing you. They all have great winter bite getting qualities and they can cover all those depths that the fish are really going to use. You know, fish really aren't going to use, once you get the pre-spawn, they're not going to use water much deeper than about 12 feet. Well, these crankbaits we're showing you today can cover all of that type of area. So as far as the gear goes, man, it's really simple. You can throw all these baits except for the Movement 80X. So the Flat 75X, the Curve 55, and the 250 MD, you can throw all of them on a 7-1 medium heavy rod with 15-pound fluorocarbon. Works great. Works great. On the Movement 80X, I like to throw it on a 7-4 medium heavy with 20 or 17-pound fluorocarbon. It's just a bigger, harder wobbling. It does a lot of this, a lot of drag, and you throw it in heavier cover. And so I like to throw it on a little bit bigger line. And I don't need the thin line to get it down because it fishes really, I mean, I'm fishing this bait really, really shallow. Now, one thing about the Movement 80X that I will do is I'll go into areas that are not the shell bed areas. I'll go into my other favorite pre-spawn areas, the grass flats. And a lot of times this time of year, the top will be knocked off the grass because of the colder weather. It'll die down. And so you'll have a 2 foot gap between the surface and the grass. When I find that situation and I've got some timber mixed in, I absolutely love the Movement 80X over everything else because it'll go down and stay over the top of that grass, but yet when it hits wood, it'll deflect so well. And it just gets bites. I know I've said it already in this video. There's just something special about that bait. and the way it hits contacts wood and bounces off of it, it gets really big bites, guys. That's all I can tell you. It's a one of a kind. It's a very unique crankbait. There's not another one on the market like it that's designed like it. One of the things that I think makes it so effective is that the bill is wider than the body. That causes it to have this huge wide swing, and when it hits a stump and it's swinging fast, when it hits that stump, it hits it so hard it makes it bounce further away from it. It makes a bigger deflection, which gets a bigger reaction. I really think that is what causes it to catch such big fish in the cold water. But that's just my theory on it. All I know is you throw that sucker and bang it around on some stuff, and all of a sudden big fish get in the boat. That's all I really know about it. So that's kind of it, guys. In summary, we got the 4 crankbaits. We got the Movement 80X, Crush Flat 75X, Curve 55, and the 250 MD. You can find all of these at sixcentfishing.com. When you do, that's linked in the description. When you order something there, be sure you punch in the code Your Lake Fork Guide. You'll get a 10% discount on anything you order. We appreciate you guys shopping there, of course. And the other part of the summary is the areas is shell beds, shallow points that roll off into deeper water. That is a key thing. It's really simple, but man, the best ones to me, I'll give you this. Here's another tip on the shell beds, guys. The best ones to me are at the mouth of spawning pockets. So like right here, there's a big flat pocket back here and it splits in two. There's a flat pocket over here, there's a flat pocket over here. There's a shallow point that runs out here with a creek channel swinging off the side. This is the type of area that I like to target shell beds on. There's a shell bed right there, and a creek swing right there, and spawning area and spawning area. I want to find the biggest spawning areas that are going to hold the biggest source of fish. So, you know, on Lake Fork, we're talking about areas like Glade Creek. Everybody knows tons of fish spawn in Glade. If you can find shallow shellbed points at the mouth of Glade, which you can, those are going to be the best ones because the most fish have to go into Glade to spawn. Therefore, the most fish are going to pull up on those shell beds to feed in the pre-spawn. But that's all it is. It's a really simple concept, man. It's a shallow point, deep water access, a feeding table. When the wind blows on it, gathers the plankton, the shad get there, it goes down. It goes down, and when you hit it right, you hit one of them right one time. And I mean, when I say right, I mean hit one of them just right one day, and you'll have 30 minutes that you'll never forget for the rest of your life, especially on Lake Fork, where we have so many big fish. Because when you get a group of them 5 to 8 pounders pulls up there and they're eating, and you throw that crankbait, it's like the faster you throw that crankbait back in there, the faster you can catch another 5 to 8 pounder. It's some stuff that happens out there at times that will just absolutely blow your mind. So please do go try to learn that, try to understand it. You can subscribe to the Fish Life app. We always will have shell beds marked during the pre-spawn period. We'll have some marked in March, April, and May as well, I'm sure. So subscribe to the Fish Life app, Lake Fork Premium Package, and you'll be able to see some of those spots and go check them out. Know exactly where they are, some of my favorite ones that I like to fish throughout the year. That's it, shell beds, and then grass flats, the early warming grass flats, wherever the water gets the warmest, those are really best on warming trends. If it's not going to be a warming trend, you better know where the little depth changes are within that grass, the drains and the creek channels, and you can throw that Movement 80X over the top of it. But primarily, this cranking deal, you can do it in a lot of areas. You can throw it down bridge riprap, you can throw it down, you know, creek channel bends, you can throw it, you know, deeper on points, you can throw it on dams. A lot of areas you can throw crankbaits in wintertime and catch fish. For me, primarily, I'm looking at the tops and sides of staging points, just like we described right behind us here. Secondary points inside the mouths of creeks, right where they're going to spawn. That's what I'm looking for most of all when I'm shallow cranking in the winter pre-spawn period. Hey, that's it. It's a pretty simple concept with cranking. Thank you guys for watching us today, man. If y'all have any questions, please let me know, man. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I certainly hope it helps you catch more and bigger fish, and we'll see you next time right here on Your Lake Fork Guide.